I have the
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and good evening to the Upper Chichester Township Board of Commissioners Caucus meeting, December 1st, 2022. Before we open it up to any of the public comments, we're going to have a presentation for 4800 Chichester Avenue. Final land development application. We'll open up the phone lines for any comments for that first, and then we'll go to the audience, and then we'll go right to the caucus meeting and open it back up for any comments, what's on the agenda, on the telephone, and also the residents that are here tonight. So we'll hand it over to Lisa to start this up for us, and then 4800. Oh, sorry about that. I got to do roll call, George.
Commissioner Bacco,
Here.
Commissioner Gardioso,
Here.
Commissioner Burkowski,
Here.
Commissioner Neary, Commissioner Whitaker, Lisa Catania, Michael Pierce, myself, George Needles, present.
Thank you, Lisa. Good evening, Rob Lewis from Kaplan Stewart, representing clients, 800 Chichester LLC. As Lisa mentioned, before you this evening is our application for final land development approval for 4800 Chichester Avenue. You will recall we were here back in August, that month 4th, and then back again on the 11th, where this voted to grant preliminary plan approval for development of the property as a 105,000 square foot warehouse building. Subsequent, it's scrolling. So here we go. Subsequent to that meeting in August, we have filed our application for final plan approval, addressing the remaining items from the review comments and the conditions of preliminary plan approval. So I'll just highlight a couple of those for you this evening. We did receive a set of review letters from our final plan submission, all dated, I believe, in the late October range. We then actually resubmitted our plan once since then, just to clean up a couple of those remaining comments. We then went to the Planning Commission a couple of weeks back in November, and the Planning Commission did recommend final plan approval. So just to highlight for the board, a couple of things. They really aren't, most of them are not significant in terms of the changes. Many of the remaining comments had to do with notes and things like that. But one that's physically evident was one of the conditions imposed by preliminary plan was to provide a secondary emergency access out to Chichester Avenue. That is where my cursor is located. We were able to work that in even with the topography. And so we have provided that. That will be emergency access only. It will have bollards and chain with a Knox box so that emergency vehicles can utilize that if for some reason the intersection is blocked or the access to our site is otherwise blocked. That will allow emergency access to the site. Obviously, that required us to move around a couple of parking spaces, but we were able to do that and remain compliant from a parking standpoint. Couple of other things had to do with making sure that we coordinated bus stop locations on Chichester Avenue. We did that with and continue to work with SEPTA and PennDOT on those locations. And then there's also comments about us making sure to extend sidewalk along Chichester all the way to the end of our property line. It turns out we actually are proposing sidewalk that goes beyond property line down Chichester Avenue. Remainder to the underpass is actually PennDOT right of way. I believe really the remaining items in the review comments on final plan approval are very minor in nature. Most of them have to do with executing agreements that your solicitor and I will work on, posting financial security, construction cost estimates, those kinds of more administrative items. But I think we're also, in addition to presenting this to the board this evening and requesting, obviously, that you consider final plan approval, I think we're actually here because we are a little bit concerned. We believe that final plan approval is warranted. We believe we have complied with the code. We've done what is necessary to transform a preliminary plan into a final plan. And I think, as we pointed out back in August, we believe this plan, in fact, exceeds many of your code requirements. But what we are also here this evening to do, I believe, is to request that the board, when drafting a resolution for approval, consider a resolution that is slightly different from what you did at preliminary plan approval. Most importantly, that is the reconsideration of one of the conditions, which was limiting the option, including the use of the facility and deliveries between the hours of 10 and 7 a.m. I will let the owner's rep, Max Ryan, address a little bit of the implications of that from an operational standpoint and an ownership standpoint. Suffice it to say that the impacts are substantial and severe to our ability to utilize the property. But I wanted to address it a little bit from a more of a code standpoint. Obviously, this condition that the board imposed was born out of a concern for noise emanating from this facility. It's owned industrial, but it is next to residential. We were asked during the preliminary plan process to conduct sound survey or sound study. And we did. And we believe that we demonstrated that our project will comply with the applicable standards. And we even agreed that every tenant coming through will continue to be required to demonstrate that they can with the noise ordinances in place. So they will have to continue to demonstrate. But we went further at preliminary, and I think your zoning officer even agreed with us that the way your sound ordinance is structured, the vehicle traffic coming and going from this facility is not subject to those noise regulations. Rather, they are governed by PennDOT. But because we know that trucks coming and going from this facility will generate noise, we agreed to go beyond simply your standards and put in an 8-foot tall sound attenuation wall all the way along our entire property. In fact, at final plan, we extended it all the way to the end of our property, which was, it had stopped shorter than that in preliminary plan, but we were asked to extend it. That wall is not required. It's not required by the sound study, but it was an accommodation. It was a compromise. That is a significant improvement. But despite that, and despite our efforts to find a compromise, the Planning Commission had recommended a condition precluding the use of this facility from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. And when this board granted preliminary approval, you incorporated the Planning Commission's recommendations. And we believe that condition really goes beyond and really will dramatically impact our property. So we are going to ask that the board reconsider that condition when considering your resolution for final plan approval. With that, I will turn it over to Max Ryan to just discuss it a little bit from ownership standpoint. Yeah, Max Ryan, Alliance Partners, representing the owners. So, in my opinion, we ended up in a pretty good place with this project. I think there are some things we've agreed to do voluntarily, like Rob said. I think that's part of the give and take that's expected of an owner. And the planning group is to push us to do so, and then we're happy to step into that in every project. The hour restriction imposed on this, surprisingly, at the end, it really renders the property unleasable, unsaleable. I even went so far as to, over this past week before today, interview some of our better brokers from NAR Mertz, CBRE, to some extent JLL, and none of them could give me an instance where that condition exists. And while they would tell you that most users don't need that, they don't think that that's going to allow us to lease it to most users. So it's kind of a deal breaker for us because and can't put at least it renders the use of the zoning somewhat worthless to us. So it's just something that can't be attached to the property from my perspective without a fight. The fight that I didn't want. I've also briefed our investors at every step of the way of the project, and including things like the sound wall and some accommodations we've made. We're not building the building as tall as we could build it, doing a voluntary sound wall. Some circulation things, some things that cost money, some things that are just felt like the right thing to do. This whole situation has had a negative response from my investors. Like, the first questions I got was, well, why are we doing those things if this is where we're ending up? So, you all may know we've submitted a preliminary plan, essentially the same project without some of those attributes. We also have Rob can explain, a pending appeal, filed legal filing to get that lifted. As I understand from speaking to Rob and other attorneys, we expect to be successful on that down the road. But that's going to cost us delay in building the building, getting rent, interest carry. So this preliminary plan is, if nothing else, it will offset some of our costs. But the reality is we'll get through it. We'll build a project that will be less appealing, less favorable to neighbors than this project is in front of you right now. And I don't think anyone wins. We just burn some money on it. So what I'd like to do is.
So you're basically saying that if we don't get somewhere with this one, you're going to jam the other one down our throat?
If I don't get somewhere with this, I'm going to offer the preliminary in front of us is to proceed with the same project minus some of the elements that we've thrown in voluntarily, because that felt like the right thing to do back then. We take away our ability to use the property for its intended use a year plus into it. Those voluntary elements don't feel any longer like they would be things we should be throwing in the pot. It's not where I want to go, but that's absolutely how this goes down when this happens.
We have to make sure that their quality of living don't get destroyed either.
I understand. I just want to be clear about one thing. When you throw in things like changing the circulation and sound wall to improve, not probably where people want it, I understand, but to improve the project beyond what we're obligated to do, that's a good thing. When it goes too far and where we are now, I just want to be very clear, people could end up worse off than they are with this plan.
I think that if we could find a guarantee that the noise ain't going to be the issue it is, then maybe that 10 to 7 could be lifted.
Well, to be clear, not only do we have to comply with the sound ordinance, regardless, that our restriction doesn't exist anywhere else that we know. We have to meet the sound ordinance, and we've done things like build a sound wall and change the circulation so that we ensure to an even greater extent that's as good as it can be for the neighbors. The alternative is we have a strong disagreement about it. Some of those voluntary attributes go away. And when it comes online in 18 months or 2 years, it's actually we've actually collectively less protected the neighbors. And I don't think anyone wins in that scenario, but that's how it could go down.
So we'd like to keep the voluntary attributes. We're happy to pay for them. We're happy to concede some things on the development of the property. So it's more palatable, not probably where people want it. And I would like to continue that. But if if we don't have that, then we have to go this other route. And you know, not a way we usually do development, but
The concerns that we're bringing up though, we're having that issue with similar, with the development on 452. And the concerns happened after. That's why we're trying to get out front and address them in front.
I appreciate it. My point is, we haven't asked for any relief or variance by right, bought the property. That is the zoning on the property. We've gone above and beyond, I think, what we have to do to make the property compliant and palatable. But imposing a restriction that essentially strips that zoning away from us at this point is a tough dose. So I don't mean it threatening. I'm just sharing the facts.
So they're my people.
Yeah,
I gotta get everything I can to protect. My concern ain't the truck noise as much as the units on top of the roofs. I brought that up the last meeting. I mean, that's the biggest concern I have to get by to get this project. I mean, that's me personally. I'm speaking for one commission.
Commissioner Bottom's point, if there's any units in top roof. One, we get the drawings and procedure. Should there be screen walls on top of that could be sound barriers off of?
yeah, I can tell you, I think I think in the sound study that we did voluntarily, that we had to do one, we did do one. I don't think there's much reference to rooftop units. Well, I just want to make a point, the sound study. Okay. That I believe there's reference into it, but I do recall speaking to the sound engineer that in a facility like this, this isn't a heavy manufacturing type of building with equipment, things like that. The rooftop equipment, frankly, a building like this oftentimes heat. You may have some limited air conditioning, but we can, those units will be far within the sound.
If that is true, I agree with you, but we don't know what's going in there, so we don't know, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
No idea what you're putting in that
Yeah.
warehouse. But that's, you know,
Yeah, we have,
That's the fear.
we have to comply with the ordinance. When we apply, if we apply for a building permit, we have to demonstrate that. We could demonstrate that at that time with the sound, if there's equipment on the roof that it's muffled and placed in the location. We could certainly meet.
So
We can absolutely, absolutely. If we can, well, when we apply for the building permit, which I know is in front of you, you can absolutely demonstrate compliance. Us, no problem.
Turning zoning performance standard. Like at my project, even when we're after the building permit, once the building's up and running. Then
Mr. Ryan, is there any other board members that have questions?
not our problem. Try to pull it up here. Take a look. It's got the exact. Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, this X here, this is the fence today. The additional right of way ends up getting dedicated to PennDOT, but we are extending the sidewalk all the way to our, right, edge of our property, so it actually will be on what we will. Project.
Mary?
How many parking spaces will down for the emergency? Because I think you were one or two short last time I looked at the plan, or they gave you those notes. I believe it's one. Yeah. I'm gonna count, so I count the spaces. We do not take any out. Okay. So you just move, you just relocate.
Yes.
Okay.
Spaces.
Yeah, this shifted spaces. It's back. That's it. Just, and then, the diamonds. See. Before we had a road. 20 5. So we didn't lose it.
I'm not sure. I have a question. I'm not sure if it's for Mr. Ryan or Mr. Lewis at this time. Number 8 regarding the historical home. What are the intentions once it's moved? I know the last hearing we had or presentation on the preliminary final. We mentioned a slab, and then I was concerned about the slab, and then it's like, well, we can't put it on a slab. It's got to be on some kind of either a 3-foot or a full basement. I'm not quite sure. But once you move the house, what are the intentions? Is it going to be just sitting there? Is it office space after you build, or are you going to button it up so it's not being weathered throughout the year and just sitting there, and then it's useless for nobody?
I'll take a couple of those pieces and actually.
Sure.
Max has been deep. Sure. Once it's basically, our goal is to reoccupy space. So. In that space, it makes sense to use it once it's there. But what we have agreed to, in our letter to the Historic Society is that as soon as we move it, we'll make sure to so that it's there. And we will do our best to find that space. We have dedicated, we have provided adjacent parking so that any tenant can have it. It's not sitting out in the middle of the field and moving park next to it. We are providing access to it. We are setting it up so that it can be occupied. It's great for us if we can have it occupied. We just have to find a tenant to do it and have a tenant and to occupy that space. Investment, making it so that they can occupy. And talking about physical unification. Primarily because I can't. I've learned in dealing with the house mover that if you have a wood structure, relocate it, you can set it onto a foundation, you can bend and sway a little bit, but a masonry structure like this, you essentially rebuild the foundation. In this case, it would be at least for the space and cover the home over it, and then you complete building the foundation up to the masonry structure. It doesn't want to sit and bend that kind of thing. So we will have a basement of sort. Probably won't be occupiable, but it'll be serviceable. Okay.
On number 8 again, the barn. Is it still open? And we've gone back and forth ourselves with the Historical Society and the barn and all this. Are we reusing any of the material for your new building as maybe inside the foyer? Or I know it's offered to the people at the Historical Society, whoever may want some of the old wood or whatever is there available. I don't want to leave it on the property forever and have it cleaned up. Are we reusing it for the house anywhere, or are we going to reuse some of it for the entrance into the office, into the, new warehouses, or what? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, a good bit, some of the volume is interesting foundation, some of the wood, but some of the volume is really new materials. It's not all interesting for building materials, it's a mix. We applied for the demo permit, which we're starting to pick up. And he asked that we interest with some of the other. We're happy to do that. So I think at that opportunity, we might find out what the historical society might want to salvage or use elsewhere. And we're committed to also using some of those materials first and apply them in our architecture. I wouldn't expect it to be a significant element. Correct.
Right.
It's that, but lobby or some element, we're committed to applying some of those materials in a creative way. But I think it's a little gray, but that's what
thank you. I'm going to open it up to the phone lines. At the comment paper. Open up to the phone lines for public comment just for this presentation right now. Give the phone number out, what to dial into. You'll be dialing 571-748-4021. That's 571-748-4021. Entering 089-814-334 #. The code again is 089-814-334 #. Once to unmute your phone, dial *6. After you unmute your phone, state your name and address and begin your comment. You will be given 2 minutes to speak, and then you will be placed back on mute after your comment. Phone lines will be open for a few minutes. Take note, we had no phone calls in tonight. We'll open up the public comment here tonight. And we'll start with as it looks like the second row. If there's anybody in the second row who want to come up to the podium, state your name, telephone number and address. Telephone number is only if you want us to get back to you.
Maureen Wall, 5105 Martin Avenue. A lot of this I said at the planning commission meeting, since you got to be there, I need to reiterate it. This warehouse will be detrimental to the adjacent residents, to their quality of life and to the property values. And this company has demonstrated that they are not in the least bit concerned with being a good member of our. Max Ryan, Director of Development, wrote a nasty, threatening, unprofessional letter addressed to the neighbors that addressed the company's economic reality of this project. Yet the company ignores the economic reality this project is imposing on these same neighbors. Companies' due diligence should have identified the costs that would be involved with the project, constraints of having residential property so close to the proposed building, the topography, the historical buildings. If the due diligence didn't identify these problems, then those who conducted it were incompetent, and I doubt it. If it did identify the problems and the likely costs, as a due diligence should do, then they were willing to take on those costs despite the economic reality. And saying differently is not accurate. It demonstrates that they are willing to spend the money despite the economic reality it imposes on the neighbors. At the Planning Commission meeting, Mr. Ryan indicated there's a project plan for his neighborhood that he opposes. Yet it is likely much further away from his back of his house than this will be from the people on Summers. He opposes that project, yet he's happy to impose this on our community. If there's any legal way to stop this, Upper Chichester should stop it, as the company will not be a good member of the community. If it cannot be stopped, these men need to understand the harm that they are doing to these neighbors. A couple things based on what they just said that I want to add. If they're not going to have air conditioning on a building that size, those loading bay doors are going to be open all summer long. I don't know how effective that sound study is going to be, because I'm going to bet it was based on the doors being closed. If they do have HVAC on the building, for both heat and air conditioning, you've got to provide a good portion, a good amount of that to be able to do anything for that size of a building. Also, it appears that the Aston warehouse must finally be in operation with people there, because in one of the Aston Facebook group pages today, there were complaints about the noise all night long for several nights now. Now, there weren't a lot of comments yet. One person said they hadn't heard anything, but a couple other people did say they'd been hearing things. And I'm sure as the days go on, there'll be more and more complaints about that location and the noise it's generating. And I don't think it's just the trucks. And lastly, we had on each of the chairs, there's this heart and soul community report. And one of the goals, one of the short-term action items is to encourage the beautification efforts of residential and business areas throughout the township. A monstrosity of a building that size is certainly not encouraging the beautification of our community.
Thank you. Anybody else in the second row like to come up? State your name and address, please.
Name is Greg Minor, 1601 Summers Lane. I just have a quick question. We were discussing at a recent meeting, the length of the sound barrier on Summers Lane. And at that time, what they were anticipating was that it would go down about halfway down Summers Lane. And that there's still houses farther on. And there was indication was that they were going to try to see if they could get it to go farther down. So I just wonder what the situation was.
Thank you.
1507 Summers Lane. Really have one comment or one question. Max's letter, whoever wrote it, I was very offended by it. I think you should be offended by this take it or leave it approach. Yes, they have made concessions. Yes, they were appreciated. But that take it or leave it attitude, stick that up the race. I could care less. Number two, the sound study that was done. Was it done on the property?
Lisa, do you know that answer? I mean,
Or
we don't,
done somewhere else that mimicked that property? How can you do a sound study on the property when you're not actually on the property? Sound resonates up and down that hill from 322. I'm sure it's going to get worse once the road's expanded. Resonates from Chichester Avenue. When you hit a pothole, you hear it. When they go down the speed bumps on Chichester or Summers Lane, you hear it, especially if a truck's pulling the trailer. I know there's plans to close Summers Lane at some point through PennDOT. These are all factors that the residents have to consider. What's it going to do to our property values? Thank you.
thank you.
Meeting. Anthony Delvacchio, 1504 Summers Lane. And I just wanted to say, I appreciate that the zoning committee or whoever it was that instituted these other extra conditions. I applaud that. And I implore you to keep them in place, because if it's not only just for us or us on Summers Lane, it'll make these developers think twice if they try and shoehorn another one of these properties in another, because the space is getting limited. We're running out of places to put these types of buildings and operations. So, you know, they're always basing everything on the rules and the regulations and the zoning that's been in place over the years. And they're complying by that as best that they can. But if we, you know, if we keep these in place, keep this particular timing in place, they'll have to think twice, they'll have to regulate twice, or they'll have to plan on it better. They want to bring one of these operations into our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions in the back row? If not, that the commissioners have all the questions. That would conclude the presentation for the 4800 Chichester Avenue. We'll move in right into the caucus meeting, and we will open the lines up for the caucus meeting now. For any questions that is on the agenda for tonight. Now, phone number again is 571-748-4021. Phone number again is 571-748-4021. By entering the code 008981433 #. That's 089814334 #. To unmute your phone, dial *6. After unmuting your phone, state your name and address. Begin your comment. You will be given 2 minutes to speak and then place back on mute after your comment. The phone lines will be open again for the agenda for the caucus meeting tonight for a few minutes. Make no phone calls in for the agenda part for the caucus meeting tonight. We'll open up to the floor again here tonight for what's on the agenda or any other concerns that you may have. Starting with the second row, if anybody wants to come up. Third row. If not, we'll move on with the regular caucus meeting. Go to the No, there is, yes. Thank you. Yes. Yep, thank you for coming out. Yes. And before we do get started, I'm making an announcement of we had an executive meeting tonight regarding personnel matters. Now we will move on to our professional reports. Starting with the engineer, Lisa Catania Engineering.
Thank you, Mr. President. You do have a copy of my report. Just a few things that I'd like to update the board on. The Wawa property, we did receive the remedial action for the McKay Avenue uh, puddling issue. They are proposing to put an inlet in the driveway along the edge of McKay Avenue. That inlet will be part of their stormwater system, not the township stormwater system, will be tied back into the site. So
There's a storm drain there now on the parking area on McKay Avenue. Is that where they're tying into?
No,
Oh,
that is ours on
that-
that.
Oh, okay.
The inlet that they'll be tying into is on the driveway that's coming
Okay.
out of the Wawa. So, AutoZone has also started their punch list work and will continue until that punch list is complete. Spoke to PennDOT. They are still waiting the HOP amendment for the ADA ramps that need to be redone. The Creekside Village, we did receive a cost estimate for remedial work to regrade the downstream 2 units of that property. And that amount is $9,225. It might be prudent for us to take action on that next week in that we can alleviate the flooding problems that the two residents are having because their patios are actually lower than the grades around the patio. So I'm going to suggest that work be done in lieu of grading and seeding that's currently on the proposal. That we'll be using a jute mat and that will be stapled in order to defeat any kind of erosion problem that we may have.
Now, is that the townhouses?
That's the townhouses. That's the Costa property.
Right. Right.
Yes. Alliance, we've had discussions on. I will not go through that particular project. The Dunkin' Donuts, as you can see, has started construction. The building has been constructed. The stormwater facility is in. Gare Plastics, we are expecting a request for a final inspection on that addition to Gare Plastics. Haven't received that yet, but in speaking to the owner, that should be coming shortly. That may actually be on the agenda to authorize that final inspection next week. The historic markers, I've completed the locations of the two historic markers. We do need to get an easement on the one property, and we're going to hold off on the schoolhouse property because of the pending actions that may be taking place there. The Chichester Avenue streetscape, you'll see in your packet a 6-page change order. That change order is 6 pages long. We've taken the items from phase one, closed phase one out, and added the additional items that will be completed under phase two. That change order is in the amount of $249,312.25, of which the township will be responsible for $33,660.19. That's all phase two. It's the stormwater projects updates. We have started the Terrace Circle Basin upgrades. Scavicchio is working on that. We're expecting that to be completed in about 5 weeks. The residents, we haven't had any severe complaints from anyone. We had some mud that got cleaned up, so we're doing pretty well with that project. The Peach Plum Cherry Street project, stormwater project, we do have a change order in the amount of $15,215. That project has not yet started. There's an issue with one of the residents. We want to make sure that she's comfortable before we have the contractor go in. The change order is actually to extend the pipe, to change out an existing inlet and extend the pipe across Cherry Street. So we'll have that completed. We won't have to open the road again. The Pennsylvania Small Water and Sewer Grant has a deadline of December the 21st. This project, this grant application actually is only a 15% match. We do have the West Colonial culvert project that we have the stormwater done, the design completed to replace not only the culverts under the road, but as well and in 2 inlets and pipe to tie into that culvert. I'm suggesting we don't have the DEP permits at this point. Any further engineering, should we get that project, will be done as part of the grant. So we'll be paying 15% of all the costs of that. Right now, based on just some increases, the last cost estimate that we've completed was back in 2020. I'm estimating that the current project would be about $470,000, of which we would be responsible for 15% for $70,500. Otherwise, for general progress, I should have mentioned one other thing. The Green Light Go grant, we are expecting to have our kickoff meeting with our professionals team so that we have gotten the notice to proceed with that particular project. That's for the improvements along 452. That's all I have unless anyone has any questions.
Does anybody on the board have anything?
It's actually under the solicitors. Yeah, and I'm going to tell you that my fingers didn't do real well because there are changes in that. The date of the drawing, the initial drawing was a preliminary plan, and that's October 22nd, 2020. That's in the preamble, and then number 16 check. So there's just some changes there. And again, it's a draft. I forwarded that to George and to Mike so they can review it.
You skip it over here.
I must too as well. I found it though.
Does anybody have anything for the engineer? Lisa, we are going to apply for that small water and sewer grant?
Yeah,
for
there's
the-
a resolution that I haven't prepared. I didn't put the name of the project in.
Right,
Um,
okay.
but there is a template of the resolution that I forwarded to George this afternoon when I finally got into the office. So it's later this afternoon.
So that'll be the company that we're using to apply for it, or is Lisa? Right.
There's a lot of water quality and technical information that needs to go into it.
Okay, thank you. If not, we'll move on to the solicitor's report. Mr. Michael Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, everybody. As we talked about at length, one of the items for consideration at the regular meeting will be the resolution for 4800 Chichester Avenue. The engineers provided a preliminary draft of that. The township manager and myself will provide any additional comments, and then the board will ultimately decide how they want to proceed on that, but that would occur next week. We have several land development extensions, one being 900 Township Line Road, the other being 3033 Market Street subdivision and land development extension, 4800 Chichester Avenue, the preliminary land development plan, which is the backup plan to the one we've been discussing tonight. And we will also need to schedule, and we've tentatively set up a conditional use hearing for 3A Namens Creek Center, which would be the operation of another daycare facility at that particular area. There is a copy of my report in your file. There are a couple of items that I do want to review. I did send out today a draft of the revised fireworks regulations based on the changes that were made with the statute of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We had several options to do, and my understanding was, at least from the direction and some discussion with the board members, is that we wanted to prohibit general utilization of fireworks for personal perspective, but that we would allow permitting process for commercial displays or larger displays. There is a draft on that. We can make whatever appropriate changes. I did tailor it to Upper Chichester and the utilization and review by the not only the township manager, but also by the fire marshal, so that he can review any of those items. So take a look at that, and then we can decide how we're going to proceed. There's no urgency right now, but I wanted to get out ahead of this before we started to hit periods of time where people may be utilizing fireworks. One of the other items that I indicated since I submitted the report was the revised contracts for flow analytics for the redistricting project. We've worked with the flow analytics people, and the contract has actually been signed and squared away based on the recommendations that we had made. So that process should begin shortly. Commissioner Neer, I know you've been asking about the Burkle property. We did appear at the Court of Common Pleas, and I think that we've got a resolution. We still have to work out some of the details, but it was explained to the Burkles and their representatives that, you know, there were aspects of the project that were completed, but it's not going to work unless they complete their end. And I think there was some misunderstanding from their perspective as to the extent what they had to do. Mr. Crowley was involved in it, and he is going to follow up with them regarding the construction of the berm, or at least the submission for the plans for the completion of the berm, as well as any tree removals. There are a number of dead trees that are there that will need to be removed, and there's talking about replanting. So their tree people are supposed to contact Mr. Crowley with a revised plan to let them know what's going on. Hopefully that will alleviate a lot of what the downstream neighbors are experiencing. Judge Durham was very sympathetic to our position of the township and basically laid out what was going to happen in the event that there was non-compliance. So I think everybody had a clearer picture and understanding of what was going on. I think there was some misperception, shall we say, on their part as to what they had.
Thank you for that, and Keith had given me an update, and I appreciate that.
Good.
I did meet with Mr. Gavin and Mr. Crowley about the property that's adjacent, because from what I can see, as to what was agreed to back in December, that most of those items on that adjacent property have not been completed. And consequently, I have asked Mr. Crowley and Mr. Gavin to proceed to site where necessary so that we can get that work done.
I think that they were willing to do that. They weren't going to complete a lot of those things until they had compliance, because they would have just been whistling in the wind with some of the stuff, because it just would have gone right around what they had constructed. So I think that there's going to be some, hopefully, cooperation between the two. We'll get it.
Thank you.
Um, yes. I've requested from PSATC some guidance regarding remote participation. I know that we've had this discussion before about this, and there have been some changes. There's also been some removal of emergency declarations. So I've asked them for their guidance as to what they believe the current status is, because candidly, there are some areas that are inconsistent with the emergency declaration and what the current status of the law is. So I've asked them what other municipalities are doing and what guidance they're getting from the governors and the executive branch as to what we can do and what we can't do. So before I went through and revised everything in accordance with what I thought it was, I thought it would be prudent to see exactly what the Office of not the Office of Open Records, but the governmental units that supervise what constitutes remote participation and when that's appropriate before we move through that. So as soon as I get some information, the PSATC has indicated they will hopefully get some things from me this week, so I can start that process. By the beginning of the year, we should have something in place there. We will need to begin our resolution for 453 Cherry Tree, consistent with the special or the conditional use hearing that was held. I think it would probably be prudent just for me to ask the developer if we can put that off until January to give everybody further opportunity to put any of those conditions in for the resolution. I don't think they're overly complicated, but I think that it might be just so everybody has a chance to look at it. I know it's this is a process that might have been a little bit confusing, and there was a little trepidation about what we could put in and what we couldn't put in. So that'll give us a little bit more time, and I think the developer will be. Other than that, I believe everything is in order.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Pierce? I did have the one with Burkle. I was kind of confused because I know you guys had your hearing and working things out with them. Same time, the adjacent property is a lot of the issue too, but
Yeah, Mr. Warsalis, who's the adjacent property, is the one that actually hired the engineer to come in and do the remediation, or at least put up a plan for the remediation.
All he did was make suggestions, Mike. That's what I want to clarify. In his letter, he made suggestions,
Understood.
and I don't believe that Mr. Warzelis is following.
I understand that, but I think that I didn't say that Mr. Warzalis had completed everything that's there. And until he does, then we'll deal with that. We'll stay on both of them. It was going to be counterproductive for him to start and do parts of it and then have the Burkles not apply with anything.
Okay.
And a waste of time, money, and effort. So I'm hopeful that the two of them will get this cooperation with the assistance of our code.
okay, thank you. That done, we'll move over to the manager's report. George Needles.
Good evening, everybody. You have a copy of my written report. Go through the line items here. Next Thursday, we will be presenting you with the final budget for the year with a recommendation to approve. That budget is for $14,537,495.70. The only change made from the preliminary budget was the suggestion to move the $10,000 from the allotment to the library allotment to the OPEB fund, and that was completed in this. So that has been advertised accordingly and is ready to go. The number 2 library funding request. The library provided a summer STEM camp in conjunction with the Upper Chichester Summer Camp. A couple of months ago, they provided a request for some additional funds to cover an overage. Marco and I met with them and assisted them in the accounting for that those programs. We came up with a overage of $851.10. So they're asking for the board to approve an additional allocation to them for $851.10. Since the millage rate is not changing from the 2022 millage rate, the board has the ability to do this by resolution. So we will have a resolution reaffirming the tax rate at the rate that it was at 2022. The trash fee proposed in the budget is an increase of $20. So we've advertised an ordinance in the Daily Times setting the trash fee at $240 for 2023. We will have that ordinance in front of you. The Community Development Block Grant application hearing has been advertised for 7 p.m. on December 8th. In your package, you have a packet that looks like this. It's the advertisement on the front, and then it is a breakdown of potential projects that we believe would be appealing for funding that fall in the different areas that are eligible for funding. We have a project in Boothwyn Highlands, a project in Linwood Heights, a project in the Boothwyn Town Center, a project in Boothwyn Heights, and a project in Twin Oaks. We will need to submit 2 projects for funding, so we'll go through those at the hearing. If you have any questions about any of those, or if you'd like to give feedback, please feel free. We went over last month the Act 57 resolution that needs to be passed by the board. So it sets forth a process that allows the tax collector to accept face value payments when individuals certify they've never received a tax bill under certain circumstances set by the Department of Community and Economic Development. We believe we have a very good model resolution to go off of for that. We have a site escrow release for 10 Freedom Way that was approved. We've through the planning process meetings for this 4800 Chichester Avenue, we have heard from the public that there's a lot of concerns over Summers Lane traffic. So the chief has been observing over the past couple of weekends and various times throughout the weekdays Summers Lane, and has reported that there seems to be additional traffic utilizing Summers Lane to get down to 322, sometimes from events being let out in the general area, and then sometimes from truck traffic. So in addition, there is a very dangerous left-hand turn from Summers Lane into 322, which is illegal, that people do quite frequently. So we are proposing moving up the blocking off of that roadway from 322 and putting in an emergency gate. So we'd like to ask the board, I believe we're going to discuss this further, Commissioner Baca, with the residents at the town hall meeting next Monday. And if it generally is in favor of the residents, we're going to ask the board to authorize us to proceed forward with any and all necessary actions to make that happen. You have your annual audit proposals from Lights On Economides PC. We're recommending the approval of those proposals as is. We've presented you with a 2023 meeting schedule. Actually, it looks like because of the way the holiday fall next year that we don't have to change a lot of the meetings, which is good because that usually becomes a little bit of an issue. Piggybacking off that, we've also provided you with the dates for the 2023 holiday schedule. We'll be asking for the approval of that as well. We have 2 requests from the tax collector for refunds, both of them due to reassessments, one for $255.98 and one for $210.56. We're recommending approval for that. We have a very unique situation involving 2 residents where one resident paid the tax bill for another resident and then was requested the refund of it. So the taxpayer who had their taxes paid and didn't make the payment is requesting the ability to make that payment at face value. The tax collector does not have the authority to do that without recommendation from the board. So we'll be asking the board to approve that. And we believe that is appropriate. And then not for this meeting, but for next meeting, I've provided you with a list of your upcoming appointments and other a couple of vacant positions on some of the boards. And just to also just please let me know if you're interested in me advertising anything on our social media, asking for people who are interested, or if you already have people in mind, that's great as well. Other than that, there's an additional 2 pages of things going on in the township that are not action items in the next 2 meetings, but that we've been working on. So we will continue to work on those items. And that is all I have at this time.
Anything to be brought to the attention to the township manager?
Regarding the community development block grants projects, looks really good. Thank you for providing the layout so you can actually see see them and what's being proposed. So thank you for whoever did that.
I just didn't see the list of the appointments that are up. I'm looking in the wrong place.
Page 4.
I got it.
Okay, if not, we'll move on to our commissioner's report. We moved in Madam Vice President Nicole Whitaker.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. I don't have much to report on. The library is sent out an email like yesterday. The library is under currently running their pie. I should say Friends of the Library is running the holiday pie sale. The pies are $20. Orders are due by December 7th. You can purchase and pay for your pies at the library. The Recreation Department had their second annual holiday festival that was held at Willowbrook Shopping Center. That was another successful event. We had several families come out and attend. We gave out gifts to the children. Santa came in a little mini parade down Shy Avenue and an antique truck, which was great. It was really nice. So I think, I'm not sure if we had the video of that yet posted, but it was a really nice event. We did have several of our vendors, unfortunately not show. So the committee is going to consider charging a fee next year. That would be, refundable, after they show, but just to secure the spot, we had a few at Community Day, not show, and then we had several at this event, not show. I'm not sure if it was, potential weather, because I know earlier in the week it was talk about rain, but that had all changed several days out. So, yeah. And what else? Oh, and the library is also running a fundraiser for cash prize, right? So it's the Jingle Bell Jackpot, $10 a ticket. The total sale, and that will be split between, it's like a 50-50 kind of, but it will be split between the winner and the library. So I do have tickets if anyone would like one. I think that's it.
Anything to be brought to the attention, Commissioner Whitaker? Now we'll move along to Commission. We'll move along to Commissioner Joe Neri.
Thank you. Good evening. Most of my reports will be available next week, including the list of bills, the financial reports, and the release reports. I thank you for your consideration. Look into that tax issue with the constituent from Creekside, who's called me several times to find out what we're going to do about it. I told her that it couldn't be done until a formal meeting, but she's anxious to pay now. But thank you very much.
Anything to be brought to the attention, Mr. Neri? Move along to Commissioner Mike Gaudioso.
Thank you. Good evening. Chester Highway Land Development. There is continuation for the zoning board that will be held next week on December 6th. That's for the McDonald project. I don't see any reason why the board should oppose any zoning variance that they are requesting. We're over 4,800, and I think that's it. So if anybody has any questions for me, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions.
Doesn't sound like it. We'll move along to Commissioner Joe Biacco.
Thank you. Touch on a few things. Highway and sanitation, I think we're just a couple inches away from finishing up the highway and sanitation workers contract. I should have a report on that by next week, but I don't see anything blocking. I think we're real close. Sewer and water, I also have a meeting with Lower Tri Commissioner to try to get this force main buttoned down. I think we're going to get some help out of Delcor to help ease the situation for them, and I think we can get that done also. And that meeting's coming up next week, so I should have something next week to report on that. That's all I have, unless anybody has any questions.
If not, we'll move along to my report. Stated the reports will be here for next week. Emergency management reports in here. He's got some reports that he did for the emergency management and situations throughout the township, who's involved, and the protocol of positions of who does what and where and all that. But I want to, last month I read a crash responder safety week. And just to give a heads up, it was a safety week in November 14th through the 18th. And well, fortunately, but unfortunately, and how ironic, our traffic unit got hit on I-95 right after we stated about this. It's dangerous out there. No one got hurt. No one was killed. Thank God. But this is what happens, and this thing's lit up like a Christmas tree. 5 o'clock in the morning. Possibility, I'm not saying it is, I don't want to commit myself, but the person could have been, but you know what I'm talking about. But 5 o'clock in the morning, they're out there on the street and they get hit. Thank God nobody, the fire truck saw it coming, or somebody did, and they hit the air horn, and it's just another warning. I travel I-95 every night, and it is that way. The construction on there, the people don't watch and they just keep moving. So it's, thank God on that one. But other than that, last night, Nicole and I went to Mr. Pierce was there. Went to the dinner meeting for the Delaware County Commissioners. And I've been saying it for quite a bit up here. And I think the eyes are open because it's all over. The EMS, the fire department, I think we got some ears, and it's time that, and I told him last night, it's not the county, it's not nothing. I beat his ear. The bottom line is, and I know the concern with the mental health and all that, that is a big concern and all that. But there's other towns bigger than ours that have the same situation. And I'm hoping we get some contacts that this committee, the Delaware County Commissioners, could get on board to try to figure out what we could do for Delaware County. It's the medic units. People are questioning why we have this one, why we have that one. Fire trucks going to different municipalities, and it's a lot of concerns. And what can we do? What's the board allowed to do? Just to help out, but not only us with the incentives with the firemen, but some of them do that also with the not the EIT, but the property tax. So that's something we did look into, but we went our direction, which is pretty fair, I think. So I'm hoping it doesn't just stop from last night. I'm hoping I get a phone call or some kind of an email, and we could continue to roundtable talk and see what between the county and the commissioners, we could come up with something. So other than that, anybody have anything for me?
So I'll just comment just because the chief is here. The EMS that Ed has been ranting about, that we know, was brought up as a side note. The point of the meeting, though, Tim Boyce attended and shared that they received a $600,000 grant, and the grant is to provide mental health professionals to go out and respond to calls with police officers. Right now, they're doing two pilot programs, one in Upper Darby and the other is in Haverford. And so depending on how it goes, right? Depending on how it goes, it could be extended and spread out throughout the county to other municipalities. The bigger issue though is that once a medical professional is called out, where do we take them? Like there's nowhere. That's kind of been the theme is like where do we take the individuals that need to be hospitalized because there really is there aren't any facilities. So they have a lot to deal with. They're still in the planning phases of it. But just wanted to let the municipalities, managers, and elected officials that were in attendance make them aware of what is happening in the county. So that's it. Thank you.
Yep, and Chief, just to follow, that's going to be a mobile crisis unit. So their intention is to have one in the western part of the county, one in the eastern part, so that it will be dispatched to the 911 center when there is a potential issue. They won't be a ride along with police officers, but they'll be dispatched from a separate unit to go to the scene if it's needed.
Michael?
Yeah. And Cherry, and the residents that attend are being concerned we're speeding and exiting and entering into Gardendale off of Chichester Avenue. So we're in the midst of discussing of how possible solutions of how to curb those situations. But I just want to say thank you for attending last night. So I appreciate it. Thanks.
If nobody else has anything, that concludes tonight. We need a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Good night.